Greetings. It's great to see you today. I'm Megan, she, hers, and I'm Chief Operating Officer with the Women's Funding Network. We are very excited for today. And to ensure you get the most out of your conference experience, we've got some quick housekeeping items to share. First, accessibility. All of the content presented in the concurrent sessions, virtual site visits, and here on our main stage are available in English closed captioning. Additionally, there is simultaneous audio and text translation to French and Spanish available. To enable these functions, please scroll below this video and follow the instructions. Additionally, our tech support team has also posted this information in the chat bar on the right. Your main navigation panel is over on the left side of your screen. Follow the red Now icon to join the live content. The full schedule is in the reception tab at the top of the menu, and the community content area is always available. On the right side of your screen, please note a few items. You will notice a purple line under main stage. This line indicates which space you are in. This will change as you join sessions throughout the day. Also note the People tab, which lets you see who is with you in this space. Feel free to use this function to connect with one another. To your right as well, there's an event-wide chat. This is visible to everyone in the main stage area, and when in a session, the chat will be available to those attendees in the session with you. Please use the chat, especially within concurrent sessions, to cheer on the presenters, ask questions, and engage with one another. We structured lots of networking time, both one-on-one and in small groups, to allow for building upon existing relationships and creating new ones. I encourage you to join us in these spaces to say hello and dig into various issues throughout the conference and at the end of the day. We ask that each of you take care of yourselves and take breaks as needed throughout this day. Lastly, if you need help with anything today, please don't hesitate to let a member of the WFN staff or the team at Events by Lady K know by email or through the chat. We are here to support you. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy your Women-Funded 2021 conference experience.
Hello and welcome to the Feminist Factor conference. My name is Paulette Senior, and I'm President and CEO of the Canadian Women's Foundation located here in Toronto, Canada. I'm also honored to be a board member of the Women's Funding Network. As we all know, the pandemic has put decades of gender equity progress at risk. It has exposed the very hard truths about who remains most marginalized and vulnerable in our societies. We know that we can't simply just go back to normal. Instead, we must center equality, justice, and systemic change in our pandemic recovery plans. The Women's Funding Network has a crucial role to play in advancing this work and creating a better future for all. The network unites women's organizations and movements around the world to propel the momentum and advance feminist philanthropy. We are so much louder, stronger, and invincible when we work for change together. As we navigate the immense challenges ahead, I'm grateful to the Women's Funding Network for the steadfast connection, conviction, and compass we all need to realize our vision for intersectional gender justice. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the event.
Together, we are reimagining the future.
Applying feminist principles
to climate justice, racial justice,
reproductive rights,
gender equality,
economic mobility,
and global peace.
to create a more just, more equitable,
more inclusive world
for all of us.
Welcome. I am delighted to welcome you to the Women Funded 2021, the biennial conference co-convened by the Women's Funding Network membership and made possible through the support of our generous sponsors. As many of you know, the Women's Funding Network is the largest philanthropic alliance in the world, made up of women's funds, foundations, gender justice funders, and all who create a world that's more safe, more just, and equitable for all of us. We're over 120 members strong, with over 450 million in annual grant making, with a global reach of members and attendees from 11 countries, North and South America, Africa, and Europe. Every other year for over 20 years, we've convened as colleagues to share what's working and share what's challenging, explore funding strategies, and ignite opportunities for cross-sector collaboration. Leaving not only with concrete plans, but also with new friends and co-conspirators for the work ahead. Admittedly, this conference is unlike any other before. We're shaking loose from the grips of a global pandemic. We're not together in person. We're fatigued, we're grieving, and we're continuing to absorb the unrelenting sadness and pain from the world around us. We want more than anything to connect, to revive, to live again in a world where wearing shoes to meetings and complaining about HR is the biggest thing of our day. Well, maybe we can do without the politics of the office break room. But the point is, the world is different today, more different than it has ever been since WFN has started convening conferences. And we only have a few precious hours together to make sure that no matter how sick of Zoom you are, you're tuned in, you're looking forward to every single minute. That's why I'd like to introduce this year's theme with a story, my story. I'm the daughter of Mexican immigrants, and I was born and raised in the majority white American US state of Nebraska. And while I'll say that most people I grew up with were polite and neighborly, I was only 5 when a white woman threatened to call police on me for accidentally walking into her house. And I was only 17 when my uncle, who didn't understand English, was misidentified and beaten to death by a white female police officer and her partner. Like many of my fellow colleagues from marginalized genders and communities of color, I unfortunately have hundreds of these personal stories. But Audre Lorde once said, I was going to die sooner or later, whether or not I had ever spoken myself. My silences had not protected me. Your silences will not protect you. What are the words you do not have? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day and attempt to make your own until you will sicken and die of them, still in silence? We have been socialized to respect fear more than our own need for language. That's why this year's theme, the Feminist Factor, is an opportunity to have a new and expansive conversation about the critical frameworks that guide and distinguish much of our collective work. We have faced the layered challenges of racism, sexism, health disparities, a global pandemic, climate change, institutional violence, and autocratic threats to democracy. It is ever more essential that we grapple with both our painful and joyous feminist movement history. Feminism, rooted in our interconnected liberation, is our strength and our challenge. Together, we can forge a movement that can withstand the current and upcoming tests. Together, we can continue shaping a more just and more equitable future for all of us. I am proud to be by your side. And as we celebrate our history, we must also look forward to how feminism can continue to grow its intersectional and inclusive principles. And we have to keep moving forward to a new concept of equality that provides justice, safety, and opportunities for all of us. Across the COVID-19 response plans and recovery efforts, marginalized genders and communities of color have led the way. They have consistently championed and deployed three main approaches to philanthropy that are driving a sustained systemic change for all of us. Number one, pooled funding for maximized impact and minimized risk. Number two, implementing a democratic and shared approach to governance and resource development, and enabling locally led, context-specific solutions. I am proud to say that together, our alliance strives to embody these principles and practices. As funds and foundations that center the unique needs of women and girls, we have an opportunity to remake the system that has been broken for so long. But only if at the very heart of our decision-making are those whose voices we seek to advance. It is fundamental that we incorporate local voices and local solutions into the very structure we seek to build. Only then can we make long-lasting structural change. Each of us have the power to make this change. Vote for women and women of color representatives that will champion community-based solutions. Give generously to organizations on the front line of change, including your local women's fund or foundation. Women's funds are system change institutions that multiply every size gift 10 times, primarily by supporting women of color-led organizations that are mapping inclusive economy built on racial and gender equity and justice. There is only one antidote to the poison of silence and inaction. Find your feet, stand up, stand with us. Together we fight, together we win.
Hello, I'm Alejandra Washington, Vice President for Transformation and Organizational Effectiveness at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. It is so great to be here with all of you phenomenal women and leaders today. I am especially excited being a former WFN member and also a board leader for WFN. I first want to thank WFN's courageous new executive leader, Elizabeth Barajas Roman, for inviting me to share a few words. I also want to acknowledge the WFN Board of Directors and recognize the contributions of the conference planning team. Thank you for making this event possible. At the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, children are at the center of everything we do. But we know that children live in families and families live in communities. So if we want children to thrive, their families need to be able to support them, and their communities need to be equitable places of opportunity. If we want to move the needle forward for children, we have to strengthen opportunities for the adults in their lives. Investing in women supports a whole family approach to building a more prosperous future. The Kellogg Foundation was an early investor in the infrastructure and formation of what would become the Women's Funding Network. In 1995, our former board member, Wenda Weeks Moore, and other representatives from the foundation attended the World Conference on Women hosted by the UN in Beijing. This was a critical moment for the women's funding movement in philanthropy. Fast forward 2007, our Board of Trustees intentionally and explicitly committed the W.K. Kellogg Foundation to being an anti-racist organization, promoting racial equity and healing as core strategies in achieving our mission. We call this our DNA, and it is comprised of racial equity and healing, leadership, and community engagement. Achieving racial equity means that an individual's identity should not be predictive of their day-to-day experiences or life outcomes. That includes women and girls. To this end, we make grants to support living wages and quality jobs for women, providing working capital for women-owned and led entrepreneurial businesses, investing in high-quality maternal and child health care, and ensuring that communities are equitable places of opportunity. We can't talk about gender equity without talking about racial equity. If we don't embed this into our strategies, we miss the mark. For this moment to grow and expand, we must understand and embrace the intersectionality of racial and gender equity. A feminist conversation absent of a racial equity conversation doesn't strategically move us forward. The past 18 months have laid bare the inequities that many communities, especially communities of color, have known, experienced, and felt for decades. We know that women are bearing the brunt of the pandemic, especially women of color. Philanthropy's pursuit of racial equity and racial healing must be a sustained movement. It can't be an episodic one. Now is the time to double down. The W.K. Kellogg Foundation has continued to double down on this issue of racial equity. For the first time last year, we issued a bond to generate $300 million in additional capital to be used in our grant making over the next 2 years. This week, we announced the 10 finalists of our Racial Equity 2030 initiative, a call for bold solutions to drive an equitable future for children, families, and communities across the globe. WKKF's Catalyzing Community Giving initiative includes 32 grantees dedicated to expanding locally driven philanthropy by communities of color. That includes many women-led funds, and WFN has been a part of this great movement. And just like all of you, I know the power of women's funds. Women's funds move money 6 times faster than traditional philanthropy. Women's funds are not only essential to the financial resources they provide, but because you are based in the communities you serve, you have built authentic and trusting relationships. You've responded to crisis. You've provided both immediate and long-term support for communities, and you've reactivated local communities. Oftentimes, you're doing this at the margins when organizations aren't able to access mainstream funding. During COVID-19, women's funds sprung into action to address unprecedented issues and needs in housing, childcare, food insecurity, and democratic process protections. Women's funds are already building future strategies to continue supporting and building resilient social movements and communities. As I wrap up my remarks, I want to both inspire and challenge us for the work ahead. I know WFN members across the globe are committed to distributing more and better resources to support gender equity and justice. We fund women, girls, and trans-led feminist organizations and movements through groups that center women as leaders in these movements. Racial healing conversations are needed to continue to bridge the divide. It is us, women, who will lead the healing process and overcome racism. We are already doing it for our children. Let's continue to do it, and let's do it together. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and I hope you enjoy today's virtual conference.